Well, good evening and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns. Well, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes here on YouTube. I'm going to chat for a little bit here, and then we're going to move over to Odyssey in about 15 minutes or so. We should be on. Does this thing working? Let me know if things are working. Before we get started. Hey, everybody, how is everyone? All right. So, I've got, as long as this thing looks like it's working, sounds good. All right, let's do it. So we are in the process of, oh, good. So we have a stream link. Awesome. All right, let's get this started. There's the link for the Odyssey stream in about 15 minutes, and then we'll go from there. I am Tom Luongo. This is the Gold Goats and Guns Hour, and it's like June something. I don't know what the fuck. And we're going to talk about the no confidence vote today with Boris Johnson and what it means. I can tell you that the Duran did a very nice job on this particular subject earlier in the day. So if you haven't watched Alex and Alex on this, I really do recommend the video that they did on this. They did a really nice job of just kind of breaking it all down as to why, even though Boris Johnson survived the vote of no confidence, we have a replay of the scenario, if not worst scenario, than when Theresa May went through the same problem back in 2019 on our way to Brexit. So, sorry about not being around last week. I was seriously out of it. Like everything else, I do so much media anymore that, like, these live streams are, I hate to say it, but, you know, I don't know that we're gonna do anything here that we're not gonna do. I wouldn't do anywhere else, but I don't mind doing them. But if I've done a lot of media, then I'm just gonna be like, please, I don't want to talk into a fucking microphone anymore. So let's get started. Let's talk about Boris Johnson. When we get over to Odyssey, I'm gonna give you some insight as to what I saw this weekend when I did my talk over at the Ron Paul Institute's Foreign Policy Conference, where I got to speak for about half an hour. Met a lot of people, did the thing. It was a great weekend, but we're going to talk about that when I get over to Odyssey again in about 15 minutes or so. So let's talk about Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson is in a death spiral. Boris Johnson came into office as Conservative Party leader in the middle of the Brexit kerfluffle in 2019 as Theresa May flamed out. And then Johnson took over as Conservative Party leader, which eventually led to elections about 6 months later. We're going to start that same process over again here with Johnson, because he is now, well, in the words of Turkish from Snatch, proper fucked, as it were. So, yeah, he's proper fucked at this point. And he had 148 members of his party voted against him, meaning the conservatives, meaning backbenchers have pretty much given him the thumbs down, and that means he's done. And it's really sad, actually, that Johnson has been as much of a disaster as he's been. But in truth, did anybody really think anything else? I mean, what's going to happen here? He was under a tremendous amount of pressure during COVID to knuckle under to Davos. He is compromised on so many issues, not the least of which is that he actually does believe in this fucking climate change bullshit. And so, but if you remember going back to April 2020, he said that he had made it clear that if they were going to go for herd immunity in the UK, they weren't going to go for lockdowns and all the rest of it. And he eventually caved on that. After one, they tried to kill him by running a couple of people into him. He got into a car accident. And I think there was a second attempt on his life. And then they just fucking gave him COVID and put him in a hospital. And you remember, you go back to Dominic Cummings, breaking lockdown and all of this stuff. It's been one manufactured crisis with Boris Johnson after another, after another, after another. His party hates him. The British establishment hates him. The British civil service hates him. They're all fucking globalists and Davos trolls. So invariably, this was eventually going to grind him down. Now, the big question is there anybody within the Tory party who's any better than he is? Not really. They're all freaking globalists. So what you're going to wind up here with is a Tory party that's a mess. Going to wind up with, I don't know, Rishi Sunak or some other, globalist Davos piece of shit who will eventually attempt to betray Brexit bodily, while Johnson has fumbled his way through to kind of trying to keep the strictures of Brexit alive. And that's the situation ultimately, is that this has just been one operation after another. Again, it's nothing more than what we saw. It's like you really see with clarity, right? And this is one of the things that the Duran guys didn't bring up, and they always kind of skirt around it because they never want to be seen as. I mean, I know Alex pretty well, and they never really want to be seen as they never want to go to the conspiratard route like I do. But it's really hard not to argue at this point. Whenever I get on a show with Alex Mercouris, he always agrees with me about, it's Davos' a friggin' problem. But in their personal analysis, they never go there. And fair enough. That's their fair cop. It's their gig. It's their bailiwick. I'm not gonna fault them for it. They have a brand and a thing, and that's what they do. And I think it's probably to their benefit and to their maybe even to their better judgment. But fuck, I don't have any judgment anymore. I don't really give a shit. So this has been coming for a long time. We started with Johnson being horrific during COVID after betraying his own people by going for the most vicious of fucking lockdowns. And then we get into the situation with the war between Russia and Ukraine, or Russia's special military operation against the against Ukraine. And Johnson trying to, it's the sad part of it is he did, well, here's the thing. He was the point man for the maximum amount of aggression against Russia through sanctions and everything else, being effectively the mouthpiece for the worst members of the U.S. State Department and U.S. military and intelligence services, who were all pushing for maximum pressure on Russia. Now, y'all know, for those of you some of you maybe see me for the first time, you'll realize one of the things that I have to explain before I go, and again, I'm only got about 15 minutes here, but I want to try and set up for you, is that there's Davos in Europe, and then there's the US and the UK. And the goal ultimately for Davos is to erect an independent European security architecture. Okay? And that's always been the goal. It's been their stated goal for a while. It doesn't listen to Emmanuel Macron speak, the French president, listen to the German political establishment, certainly the Greens, and you get this sense that there is a functional split between the neoconservatives centered around the British intelligence and foreign service, and the American State Department, and our intelligence, and to a lesser extent, our foreign policy establishment in general. It's very neoconservative. Now, Europe is very neoliberal. There's not really that much difference other than the fundamental domestic policy as to reasons why they want to take over the world. They vary a little bit in how they believe they should take over the world, but believe me, they're in cahoots about wanting to destroy Russia, wanting to destroy China, and bring them into the fold, and not allow the global South, led by Russia, China, and to a lesser extent Iran, their ability to escape the dominant position that both dominant factions in the West actually want. Problem is, at the same time, Davos wants the European Union and wants Europe to be in the dominant position in this, wants to reverse the dynamic, whereas it's always been, at least for the last, say, 75, 80 years, it's been the US and the UK that have really driven the foreign policy bus, whereas Europe has always gone along with this, and believe me, they've been willing fucking partners, but now they want to reverse the dynamic where they're in charge and the US and UK have been discredited and then become subordinate. And so this is part of the reason why Soros and company installed the Biden junta in the United States, was very angry about Johnson taking over and pushing for a hard Brexit. But Johnson was always a kind of weak figure who agreed with the foreign policy goals as long as Britain and the United States stayed as the dominant faction. Let's destroy Russia. But it's this tension between, who's going to rule, whose foreign policy quagmire will reign supreme, or whose foreign cuisine will reign supreme. And, right? The quote, sorry, bad joke about Iron Chef, if you've ever seen that show. But this is ultimately what we're talking about here, is that this tension is creating real problems. And Johnson, as per the Duran, and I agree with them on this, Johnson and the U.S. pushed really, really hard and put everybody's reputations on the line, put everybody's economy and political future on the line, trying to destroy the Russian economy through sanctions and pressure and everything else, and it's failed completely. And now they want their pound of flesh. Now, I'll be honest with you, I've always felt like this was the fucking goal anyway, which was just to allow the neocons centered around the British Foreign Service their head here, and the U.S. State Department their head here. Let them run this disastrous project against the Russians, who then turn around and continue to grind out in a World War I style the Ukrainian military, and that's that. While at the same time, Europe can sit back and go, look, we never really wanted this in the first place, but, we kind of did, and we went along with it, but, we're the victims here. They always play this fucking game where they allow the U.S. and the U.K. to act like the belligerents, and then they always sit back and go, well, we're just the victims here. We're not really independent actors, even though they, have pushed for the worst sanctions imaginable on the Russians, just as badly as everybody else, but they've allowed Johnson to take most of the political heat for it, so that they can then turn around and go, see, it really wasn't us. Meanwhile, the German Greens have destroyed their position in government within 6 months. It's actually quite amazing. So if you think Johnson's, political destruction here is impressive, and it is, because he walked into power, in late December 2019, with literally the biggest Tory majority since Margaret Thatcher. He had the opportunity to remake the UK, to remake Great Britain in a way that no one since Thatcher, or as Mercurius pointed out, Clement Attlee, have had, and he squandered the whole thing. But we're going to have the same problem come down the pike in Germany in a few months, if not a few weeks. Because the situation there is fraying badly, because the weak Davos created, cobbled together coalition in Germany is a mess. The polls haven't quite turned against the Social Democrats and the Greens, but notice, if you do look at the German polls, you'll see that the CDU now all of a sudden is in a dominant position. Problem is, the CDU will still have to form some kind of coalition government with somebody else. You've got the incompetent alternative for Germany, the AfD, the best example of an opposition party, mostly controlled oppo, or at least they're just incompetent to the point where it doesn't matter if they're controlled opposition or not. So Germany is still going to be politically a nightmare that Davos is going to be able to, continue to cobble together a bad coalition there. You've got Macron his party will likely lose the parliamentary majority in the upcoming parliamentary elections in France. While he'll be president, he won't have a parliament that supports him. You've got Joe Biden, whose government here in the U.S. is falling apart. This is all what I've been saying from the beginning, that the Russians are playing their classic game of attrition against the West, who have overextended themselves by committing to a policy that they can't fucking implement. And the Russians have created a kind of fortress mentality, and a kind of, and along multiple vectors have made themselves strong enough economically, culturally, politically, militarily to withstand this pressure. And because they're standing against these people who've openly come out and said, we want to create a global tyrannical police state that looks like a cross between Terry Gilliam's Brazil, Huxley's Brave New World, and George Lucas's THX 1138. And we're like, you know, this is just unacceptable. And everybody's beginning to see this. And the whole global south is like, you know what? We control all the fucking commodities. How about fuck you? This is why the Arabs won't raise oil production. Translation, maybe they may not really even be able to do so, and all this other stuff. So when you really put all this together, it's pretty clear that it was always going to work out this way. The big question from the beginning is whether or not the Russian military is strong enough to withstand the potential counterattack. Now, I've been watching the British tabloid press very carefully and kept hearing things like, well, you know, Putin's sick and's not going to make it through September. And everybody's been talking. There's just multiple things that have been out there in the zeitgeist that, especially coming out from the Brits, that by August or September, there's going to be a different world. Now, Johnson's probably not going to be out of office until around that time frame. Figure out August, September, as Alex was talking about this afternoon. I'm just putting this all together now. There won't be a new Conservative Party leader before that because they have to go through an entire internal election and blah, blah, blah. So all this shit's going to take. So whoever is going to take over, and the Tories already know who they want to take over, is most likely going to continue the same policy that's going to get Johnson whacked. They're just going to put a guy in charge that Davos is happier with while they create a new potential counterattack and counter push against whatever it is that the gains the Russians have made over the course of the last month or so and the next 2 months. So it's going to be very interesting because they just feel to me like they're signaling like they're going to try and assassinate Putin. They're going to try and go for some kind of political upheaval within Russia at the same time as there's a potential massive counterattack when all the weaponry and whatnot that have been pledged to Ukraine shows up. Now, this is the way it feels like it's going to work out. I don't know whether or not it's actually going to work out this way, but this to me feels like the most dominant scenario. So I want you to really factor this stuff in, that with a change in political leadership in the UK, you're going to get a more Davos-centric leader come out of the Tory party, which means that Davos is going to get what they fucking want here. And the big question then is, like I talked about in my live stream from 2 weeks ago, and I've talked about in various other media I've done, and the article I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago, which is who is actually setting foreign policy objectives for Davos vis-a-vis Ukraine at this point? Is it Henry Kissinger or is it George Soros? Henry Kissinger is saying realpolitik needs to rule here. We don't have the fucking horses to take the Russians down. And if we continue to act the way we're acting, the Russians are just going to walk away from us. They're going to take the entire fucking global south, including China, India, the Middle East, and everything else. And they're going to walk away from us. And there's not a fucking thing we can do about it. And then we're going to lose Russia permanently to the east. Translation for Kissinger, FYI, it's already done. The Russians are fucking done with us. Okay? Especially after the last EU sanctions package. So it feels to me like the Soros wing of that group is winning the agenda fight. And if that's the case, holy shit, dudes. Like, we're pushing towards a massive escalation as being told to us by the British deep state and to a lesser extent the American deep state, setting up for an escalation of September, which could be very, very ugly. Now, I could be wrong about this because, of course, we have the midterm elections in November in the United States. But that would also factor in here. Because if by September or so, Biden officially gets NATO and somebody is able to figure out a way to officially get NATO to jump into the war in Ukraine, the Democrats are going to try and run on you don't change horses in midstream in the middle of a fucking war. And abortion. And guns. Like, that's going to be their argument. I don't know that that's going to work. They might actually like backlash against them really, really badly. I certainly hope so. But at this point, that's what I'm seeing. So, all right, that's really what I've got to talk about here on YouTube. For those of you who are going to follow me over to Odyssey, there's the link. If you're not, and for those of you who do me a favor, go ahead and put the link in this in the thing while I get prepped to go over to Odyssey. We're going to move over there and we're going to talk about this in more detail. All right, so that's what we've got. Over there, I will actually look at the chat. We'll have a longer discussion, a more interactive discussion. But when I do these 20-minute intros on YouTube, I don't really want to. I don't even look at the chat anymore. I've got to get this done, and then we go from there. So for those of you who like what you heard, you know, give a like, give the subscribe, do the thing. I don't really give a fuck. And meet me over on Odyssey in about 5 minutes, and then we'll go from there. You can follow my work over at my blog at tomluongo.me. All the links are down below. You guys know the friggin' YouTube routine. I have no interest in reiterating that stuff. So let's go from there. You guys be well. You take care. We'll talk soon. We're talking about 5 minutes over at Odyssey. Keep your stick on the ice.